Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. We'll get started in just a few minutes, but thank you for joining us today.
Hold on.
University of Wisconsin Madison's Cooperative Children's Book Center.
Once again, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. You can see we have several pages of Zoom tiles on the video images on the screen. So we have a large crowd here, but glad to have you. Stay tuned and stay put. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. Thank you.
Hold on right quick, bro.
All right, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today, everyone. I am Kari Garvin, and I have the pleasure of serving as President and CEO of United Way of Greater Greensboro. And on behalf of our Board of Directors and staff, welcome to today's Mayoral Forum. Now, before we hear from our candidates, I want to explain why your United Way decided to host this event. Next month, United Way of Greater Greensboro will celebrate its centennial anniversary. That's right. We're turning 100. And for the past 100 years, our mission has centered on making this community better. In fact, our work has always focused on the importance of bringing the community together to address its greatest needs. And as many of you know, we are currently focused on ending local poverty. And while we may soon celebrate our 100th birthday, we aren't your grandparents' United Way. That's just our way of saying that we have changed the way that we have operated through the decades. We do not simply raise money and pass that money along to other organizations. Now we take on a more participative role in engaging the community to affect systems change. Our work to end local poverty is founded upon a holistic strategy that includes creating and funding partnerships that are producing positive outcomes related to our work. We are as willing to make investments in innovation and lead the way with innovative solutions. And we certainly decided to take our efforts of ending local poverty to the next level. We decided that recently, and I want you to check out this short video to learn a bit more about our new bold goal.
Our community has spoken.
And it's time for all of us to face reality.
The pandemic and the renewed civil rights movement
highlighted real challenges many families face.
And the often overlooked existence of local poverty.
Facts can no longer be disputed.
Poverty is an everyday truth for over 57,000 people in Greater Greensboro.
1 out of every 4 children
In Greensboro is growing up in poverty.
There are neighborhoods in our community
Where over 40% of the population
Have lived in poverty for multiple generations.
Poverty is relentless.
and decades of systemic issues
Have disproportionately impacted people of color.
These facts are unacceptable.
Our community has proven time and time again
that we can accomplish anything when we are united.
That's why for over a year, United Way of Greater Greensboro listened to
And collaborated with thousands of people in our community.
To take our efforts of ending local poverty to the next level.
Together, we developed a bold goal that belongs to all of us.
As a community united in equity and lasting solutions,
3,000 households in Greater Greensboro
Will leave generational poverty by 2030.
Imagine, on average, over 300 households per year.
Leaving poverty over the next 9 years.
At United Way, everything we do is committed to helping people leave poverty.
We collaborate with nonprofits, businesses, leaders,
and caring people from all across our community
To generate collective impact. United, we will achieve the bold goal
by creating and funding strategic partnerships
with proven outcomes.
that provide education, training, and support.
to help people get jobs that can provide for their households.
We'll continue to operate our nationally recognized family success centers,
where children and adults are receiving coordinated services in one location.
And bold goals require bold innovation.
which is why we're developing a countywide mobile-friendly network
That will connect people to services
and coordinators
that will help them identify,
Track and achieve their personal goals of leaving poverty.
We cannot do this work alone.
It's time to put our collective efforts into building a community that benefits all of us.
Local children, adults, and families need your support.
It's time to be bold.
Visit unitedwaygso.org
To learn more, take action, and make a donation today.
This bold goal gives our community something important to rally behind, doesn't it? And it really does belong to all of us. And in case you missed it, one more time for good measure, that goal is, as a community united in equity and lasting solutions, 3,000 households in Greater Greensboro will leave generational poverty by the year 2030. People in our community are working hard to transition out of poverty and build better lives for themselves. And more often than not, they're facing barriers that are perpetuated by systems that simply do not work together for their benefit. It is our responsibility to do what we can to provide resources and supports that make their transitions out of poverty as easy and streamlined as possible. That is why we are hosting today's forum. As a community, we have to do better. And we know that you have joined us today because you believe we can do better. No matter what your political affiliation, no matter who you vote for, no matter who is elected, United Way of Greater Greensboro wants to build a brighter future with each one of you. Now, you've heard enough from me, and it's time to hear from our candidates. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Michael Cottingham, United Way's Vice President of Marketing and Communications, who will moderate today's session. Michael?
Thank you, Kari, and thank you again to all who have joined us today. At United Way of Greater Greensboro, we are committed to working with our community and calling on all local leaders to get involved. Today, we are joined by a few of those local leaders who have decided that they want to be the next elected mayor of our state's third largest city, Greensboro. They are Incumbent Mayor Nancy Vaughan, City Councilman and candidate Justin Outling, and candidate Eric Robert. Today, I will ask our participants a series of questions, and they will each have 2 minutes to respond. Our participants were given the opportunity to see and prepare to answer the 4 predetermined questions I will pose to them. And in true United Way fashion, these questions were created with the input of our community. In addition to the predetermined questions, we'll select 2 additional questions from the chat. So if you have a question you want us to consider, please share it in the chat. And please know that if we do not answer your question today, United Way will consider what you share as we continue to collaborate in the community. Today's forum is not a debate. It's not a place for political attacks. Our participants have agreed to be cordial, and we expect the same from our audience, who is asked to remain muted during the event. Anyone who does not abide by this rule will be muted or removed from today's meeting. Now, today's forum is about elevating our community's efforts to end poverty and discovering how our participants plan to address the issues of poverty in the future. It's also important to note before we get started that the Guilford County Board of Elections will reopen filing from February 24th through March 4th. So there could be additional candidates added to the ballot for the general election, which is currently scheduled to take place on May 17th. So do your best to stay informed over the coming weeks, as there may be additional candidates added to the ballot. We've done our best to identify those who have filed or intend to file. And in fact, just before today's event, we were contacted by Taekwon Knight, who informed us of his intentions to run for mayor. Understanding our format, he agreed it was a little too late to participate in today's meeting, but he may be joining us as an event attendee. Now, we will begin today by asking each of our 3 participants to give a short introduction of themselves and let us know why they are running for mayor. Mayor Vaughn, ladies first. Mayor Vaughn, you are currently muted.
Thought I would have had that down by now. I want to thank the United Way for kicking off this election season. Knowledge is power. I'd also like to thank those of you in attendance for taking time out of your day to hear about these important topics and to learn more about your candidates. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I am a mom of 3 children, 2 grandchildren, and we have 5 dogs. It's a pretty full household. I have always served on multiple working boards. It's something that I truly enjoy doing. I think being mayor is the best job in the city of Greensboro. I am proud that my main priority is and always has been to be your mayor, to be the mayor of our residents and our visitors. I have made personal and professional sacrifices to make sure that the city of Greensboro is always my #1 priority. When I'm out with my daughter, we have something we call the 50 feet rule, and we can't walk more than 50 foot without somebody stopping us to talk about the city. And I absolutely love that. They tell us what they like about the city, what they don't like about the city, but it's always an opportunity to engage with the public. I like it when people come up to me and say, hey, you are my mayor, or hey, you are our mayor. They don't say you are the mayor. And I think that's important because it's important to me to connect with people. When I'm asked what I'll remember most about being mayor, it's not the big economic development announcements. It's about the times we pulled together. I'll remember the damaging hurricanes, the impact that the tornado had ripping through East Greensboro, the death of city employees, the fire that took the life of 5 children, the death of Marcus Dion Smith, social unrest, and the ongoing pandemic. These are times that truly took leadership and pulled our community together. Obviously, I am very proud to have been on the recruiting team that brought us Publix, Toyota, and Boom, and that I had played a pivotal role for the Tanger Center, which is one of our largest economic development announcements. These projects and many others benefit our community and our small businesses, and I am always proud for the leadership role I played.
Thank you, Mayor Vaughn. Councilman Outling.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Justin Outling. I'm a member of Greensboro City Council, an attorney, as well as a candidate for mayor. A little bit about my background. Really, the only thing that I would impress upon you is that I deeply love Greensboro. In all of the foundational ways, it's the core of who I am as a person. I met my wife at UNC Greensboro, our freshman year of college. Our 2 young children, Clark and Clara, 8 and 12, attend elementary school at Jones Elementary in the Warnersville neighborhood. In addition to serving on council after graduating law school at Duke University and practicing law in New York City, I now practice law at really one of the best law firms in the entirety of the state, Brooks Pierce. And so as someone who deeply loves Greensboro and is really enmeshed with our community, I know that Greensboro should be the envy of all its peers across the state of North Carolina. And yes, that includes Raleigh and Charlotte, Durham, you name it. We have a high quality of life, low cost of living, some of the best colleges and universities in all of the state, whether you're a Spartan or an Aggie like my mother. We should be the envy of every city. However, Greensboro has fallen behind our peer cities year after year, and the gap has gotten wider. You probably are aware some of our largest corporations in the city have left, whether that be VF or others. Greensboro is now ranked by the US News as the 8th most dangerous city in all of the United States. And year after year, we've had a record-breaking number of homicides. And as a council member, I especially know that we have tremendous people and organizations like the United Way working to solve these difficult problems. But as a council member, I also know it takes really effective mayoral leadership to pull the city council together so we can have real progress for our community. So that we can do things like focusing on innovation and using the unique asset that is North Carolina A&T to create a real innovation corridor, like successful cities, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and even more closer home, Durham, North Carolina, and Winston-Salem. So that we can do things to help individuals break the generational curse of poverty by having youth employment jobs guarantees for young persons who live in certain areas of the city where they're more likely to be involved in crime or to be victims of crime. Tackling structural problems like transportation, ensuring that everyone can share in the benefits of the terrific news that recently came to our community, whether it be Publix on the outskirts of the city, the Randolph mega site in Randolph County. But we have to make sure we make the difficult decisions and have the vision to make sure that opportunity lifts everyone in our community. So I look forward to speaking with you more about my vision for the city and how we can work together to close the gap between our potential and our reality and not lose further ground to our peers. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, candidate Robert. You are muted.
Better? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eric Robert, and I'm a local designer and citizen advocate. I've been very fortunate as I emigrated to the United States almost 39 years ago. I was born in France, but I came straight from Gabon and west coast of Africa. I have been in Greensboro on and off since 1986. And I've been very fortunate to have lived the American dream. I mean, this country has been very good to me. And so as the city of Greensboro, so this is really my way to try and give back to a community that has supported me throughout all the years. I graduated with a degree of economics from UNCG, and then went on to what is now Elon University to get a master's in business. One of the reasons I'm running for mayor is because I simply believe that we deserve better. Over time, I've witnessed that a lot of our constituents and residents are struggling, and that they're experiencing inequalities and uncertainty on a daily basis. I believe the majority of people in Greensboro have much more in common than it appears. And we have challenges, but we can overcome them as a city and as a community. We must, though, to be able to overcome these challenges, we must have the very difficult discussions that so far we've been unable to have. I think I have a unique perspective in how I've lived my life and what I've aspired to accomplish. I think that, we have lost the fact that a lot of our current elected officials, seem to forget that they are there to represent the citizens. And some key positions within the city government also have forgotten who they work for. And it is my firm belief that key positions such as like the city attorney really need to be reminded that they do work for the citizens of Greensboro, even though right now they work for city council. So in a nutshell, my intentions are really to try and bring back transparency to local government, as too many decisions have been made lately behind closed door. And I'm a firm believer that, if the public can know about it, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. I hope at some point, we can discuss anything else that weighs heavily on your mind, and I remain available. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you guys for those introductions. So let's jump into our Q&A. Question 1, and remember, 2 minutes to respond. Question 1, reports indicate prior to the impacts of COVID-19, more than 57,000 people in the greater Greensboro community were living in poverty, which is defined as a family of 4, as an example, with a total household income of just $26,500. Why should people care about these alarming numbers? Eric, we'll start with you.
Okay. Well, I have to be honest, and when I was invited to this forum, I was not really sure that I could actually be able to contribute anything of value and speak intelligently about this problem. So I studied and I read and I looked at presentations and seminars and initiatives from really all over the world and from other cities. And the one thing for sure is that, there's no magic bullet. There's only stopgaps and some programs that are better than others. The other thing I found out is that depending on who you talk to and what you read, the poverty rate varies. And now you add inflation on top of it, and even the poorest people are becoming even more poor, as some of the programs have not been able to keep up with the current inflation. So while I could regurgitate a bunch of statistics, I think that, the ones that we need to focus on is that the national average is between 13.4 to 14.1, and then the one in Greensboro is close to 20%. So however you look at it, it's we are way, way, way over the national average. And how it translates for us is that we have a population of roughly 300,000. So that means that we would have 60,000 people living either at or below the poverty rate. And the other thing I found out is that, especially in places like Greensboro, is that the concentrated poverty has increased dramatically. And because we weren't able to address urban poverty, it's now spread to our suburb, and it's largely increasing. Poverty can really no longer be contained. It's out and it's growing exponentially.
All right, Mr. Robert, that concludes 2 minutes. So, Justin, you are up next. Mr. Outling.
We should care about these alarming numbers because Greensboro is a progressive and compassionate city. It's in our DNA. And poverty has devastating effects on the community at large, as well as the individuals, both literally and figuratively, in the fight for their lives just to make sure that ends meet. And Greensboro has a lot of ground to make in this regard. The poverty rate in Greensboro is nearly twice that of Charlotte and Raleigh. And we're in real danger of further becoming two cities, one in which certain community members and in certain zip codes, there's an opportunity for a better life, for your children to do better than you have, and other areas where that's just not likely for a lack of opportunity. And these impacts affect all of our community through underfunded schools, higher crime rates, substandard housing, and burdens on our healthcare. And I've certainly seen this even more at an individual level. If you look at Guilford County schools, I think as was remarked earlier, you have nearly a third of all Greensboro students in the 1st through the 4th grades who live in poverty. And they're starting at fundamental disadvantages that limit their potential as well as our community's potential. And I've seen this at my daughter and son's school, Jones Elementary, which is a Title I school, where literally the school has to take such lengths as having a refrigerator stocked with food to ensure that some children receive at least one healthy meal in their day. But I also know that with opportunity, both on the individual level and as a community, we can do better and lift ourselves out of poverty. I saw this in the community in which I was born, Buffalo, New York, in which my father, like many Greensboro residents, had a good manufacturing job, but lost that job when it went overseas. But my father was blessed in that he found a job, not a terrific one, but one of the few jobs that were available, that of a garbage man, where he was able to work with my mother.
We'll have to stop there, Mr. Outling. Mayor Vaughn, why should people care about these alarming numbers?
Thank you, Michael. And I truly appreciate the big, bold goal that the United Way has of liberating 3,000 families from the chains of poverty. I believe that poverty in the United States is an important public health issue. The federal number for a family of 4 continues to rise across the entire country. We care, I care, because people living in poverty are our neighbors, our students, our coworkers, and our essential workers. They are our future. We care and we act because residents of impoverished neighborhoods or community are at an increased risk for mental illness, chronic disease, higher mortality, and lower life expectancy. Some population groups living in poverty have a higher rate of heart disease, diabetes, obesity, and lowest educational attainment. When we look at a study that we call our fire crescent, we follow these trends. We can see low educational attainment, health disparities, crime, food insecurity. They rest in our highest census tracts. It shows that we must continue a holistic approach to approach this problem. The city has reinforced our workforce development. They have a mobile office that meets people where they are. We have a next gen initiative that works specifically with youth 16 to 24 to get them job ready. We know that jobs go a long way in helping cure poverty. Pairing our youth with mentors and job opportunities that they may have never considered is so important. The police chief's 500 job initiative that he kicked off last summer and that I was instrumental in helped place over 500 of our youth.
Mayor Vaughn, we will have to move on to question number 2. Thank you. So poverty is often stigmatized as a personal failing rather than a failure of our systems. Crime in lower income areas continues to make the news. People continue to have limited access to grocery stores and fresh produce. COVID-19 disproportionately impacted lower income areas of our community. So, how does your strategy for combating poverty factor into your strategy for leading systemic changes to address these issues? This time we'll go in the order of Justin, Nancy, and Eric. Justin.
Thank you. It's really important to understand that the mayor sets the agenda for the city council and has the bully pulpit. That means the focus or the lack of focus flows from the decisions of the mayor. And as mayor, I intend to use both of those things effectively and often. The council had previously set a goal to reduce poverty, but there hasn't been a single work session over several years on the topic or analysis of the metrics to show progress. That's simply unacceptable. It's something that we see both when we look at poverty as well as when we look at crime. We can and should do better. And to Mr. Robert's point, we can't lose focus on the fact that poverty is not evenly distributed throughout Greensboro. Nearly 1 in 4 Black persons in our community live in poverty and 1 in 3 Hispanic persons. So we must actually make and create structural change. It's not good enough to say we want to encourage private employers, as the city does now, to hire our youth. We must have a youth jobs guarantee, similar to actions taken by other cities like Washington, D.C. and Charlotte for many years. so that those young persons can not just get a job during the summer, but they're assured to develop job skills that makes them ready and puts them on par with their neighbors in more prosperous zip codes. We also have to look at affordable housing and public transportation, actually making the tough decisions and prioritizing our budget to make sure that everyone, especially in poverty-stricken zip codes, can make it out to those job opportunities now that especially they'll be outside of Greensboro, whether it be at the Randolph mega site or at Zoom or at Boom rather, out at the airport. We can do these things, but it takes really strong, effective mayoral leadership in recognizing and having a vision, not just for what's here today, but for what we can do tomorrow.
All right, great. Thank you, Justin. Right at 2 minutes. Mayor Vaughn.
Thank you. And I'm very pleased to hear that Justin agrees with the initiative, the mentor initiative that we've already jumped off to make sure that we have children who are working with mentors and that they look at long-term employment and upskilling. I believe that we have many systemic inequities. As a city, though, we've been very intentional in looking at how we do business. We have a robust MWBE program. Our numbers that utilize minority-owned and women-owned business have continued to improve, but we do have a long way to go. We've changed our hiring practices. We banned the box to encourage ex-offenders to come to the city, apply for jobs, and know that they will be considered. It is important that we lift up ex-offenders in our community to make sure that they have hope. I voted for the $15 an hour minimum wage for benefited and full-time employees. Fresh food is a significant concern, but we have made many strides. If you look at studies like the USDA, they have shown that Greensboro has made significant strides when it comes to food insecurity. Feeding America is a great resource to look at. They've been tracking data for over 11 years. We have paid family leave. We have time for people to volunteer in school. I was on a language access group that made sure we got the messages out to underserved community as COVID was going on, so they knew what safety precautions they had to take. We were able to get the mobile medical units out there to make sure that people were getting vaccines and getting health care. We're working with Moses Cone on a dental unit. We are incorporating public health and poverty issues within our city buildings. We are looking at a new Windsor Chavis NOCO Park, which will be.
Mayor Vaughn, I will have to interrupt you and move on to Mr. Robert. Mr. Robert, you are muted.
Sorry about that. I firmly believe that to fight poverty, you must fight inequalities and inequity. And it's easy to blame poverty on the poor, but the best metaphor that I found is actually comes from a friend and mentor of mine. And it's about the fish. Maybe you've heard it, but if there's one dead fish in the water, you're wondering what's wrong with the fish. But when you got 60,000 dead fish, then there's probably a problem with the water. And this is exactly what we have here. Again, like I said earlier, I studied many programs and examples from across the country and from around the world. And I discovered that what is really particular about poverty in America is how easy it is to fall into it because of the inadequate support system that doesn't exist, that exists, excuse me. As residents in poor communities faced underfunded school and everything that everybody knows, higher crime rate, substandard housing, poor health, etc. I think that instead of coming up with like stopgaps and gimmick solution, we really need to kind of rethink the approach and all the players that are involved. And the conversation must be bigger and include more cooperation. We need to really mobilize like the public. We need to, the private sector, the health sector, law enforcement, educators, community leaders, city planners, transportation experts, economic authorities, county, city, state, almost contribute to it all because everything affects it. So I don't want to sound like a musketeer, but basically, all of these entities that I just named can absolutely have an impact on the current rate of poverty that we're currently experiencing in our city. And in exchange, by decreasing the rate of poverty, it's actually going to impact all of these other entities. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Robert, thank you for your response. We'll move on to question number 3. I'm sure each of you are aware of the growing need for safe and affordable housing in our community. And while there are many positive examples of subsidized and privately owned affordable housing options, there are photographic reports of families who are living in homes with leaky ceilings and mold. So during a period of economic recovery, property values have also increased and rents have been on the rise as well. Safe and affordable housing is a critical component to building a pathway out of poverty. As mayor, what will you do to ensure safe and affordable housing? And specifically, what can be done to ensure systems aren't unintendedly preserving substandard housing? This time we'll go in order of Mayor Vaughn, Mr. Robert, and Councilman Justin Outling. Mayor Vaughn.
Thank you, Michael. I was chair of the North Carolina Metro Mayors Organization, and this is one of the topics that we talked about a lot. Safe, affordable housing, the issue and the lack of is not unusual to Greensboro. It's actually the same throughout the entire state. One of the things that I proposed to the legislature is that they should have a cabinet level office that really looks at housing. And I hope that that is something they'll consider down the road. I have worked very hard to hold landlords accountable. We were actually able to hold a landlord accountable to the tune of $200,000. Now, the original, it was the Agapians, and it was regarding the Cone Summit. And while we originally sued them for $750,000, people who understand the statute realize that they are forgiven dollar for dollar for the money they spent on the repairs. It was unprecedented that we were able to hold a landlord responsible for a monetary settlement. Getting $200,000 from them was a good start. Not only that, they sold that building and it is in much better condition now. I really championed for the housing hub. It's important that we have all of our housing providers in one space. So when somebody has an issue, they're not shuffled around from one group to another group, that they've got a one-stop shop. I'm currently on a task force that is looking at the continuum of care. It's people with the county, it's all of our service providers, it's people in the city, to make sure that we're looking not only for housing, but the people who are living on the street, how can we get them into safe housing? I believe that when you look at housing, it has to be a holistic approach. It's not just the city, it's the county, it's the school system, but we have to include our housing providers. We recently
Mayor Vaughn, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Eric, yes, Mr. Eric Robert.
Yes, sir. I disagree a little bit with what Mayor Vaughn just said. First and foremost, I think that we must adopt a zero tolerance policy for slumlord and chronic abusers preying on the weakest. Again, in a city our size, we know exactly who they are, and we should never settle with them. Of course, it would help that once we go to court that we don't lose evidence. That would probably help us. Second, I think that we need to get out of our own way, and we need to recognize and admit that the traditional needs in terms of housing has changed. The family is no longer the same as it was defined even 20 years ago. And for that, the city can do a whole lot. I mean, we must review a lot of our policies, a lot of our zoning policies, and we must also, while we're creating new affordable housing, we need to also activate some of the things that we have. And for example, you just look at our downtown Greensboro, while everybody's complaining about the blight and advocating for density, we have most of the upper floors in most of those buildings that are unoccupied. Well, in fact, they could actually house some people. And for that, we need to become more business friendly, and we need to be able to not just tell no to people, but actually try and guide them on how they can actually renovate those buildings and have them occupied. I would also encourage everybody to kind of rethink on how we award incentives. For example, a lot of developers are coming in and they're asking for incentive and they're coming to the 12th. And now we're even thinking about giving water and sewer outside of city limits. And I will advocate that if we think about doing that, then I think it's only fair that we ask for a specific portion of the development to actually be affordable housing. And for us to then not just bring water and sewer, but also transportation, so we can bring those people back.
Okay, thank you so much. 2 minutes is up. Mr. Outling.
Thank you. Before I joined the city council, I served as a volunteer on the city's housing-related board. Through that experience, I saw so much misery in terms of the conditions in which many of our neighbors live. It'll literally make your heart break. These are structural issues that must be solved with proactive leadership. That includes holding slumlords accountable, which the city has not been willing to do. Reference was made to a settlement with a family known as the Agapians. That settlement was for pennies on the dollar. A family that was involved in a situation in which years before, 5 small children died in a fire. And people shouldn't have to lose their lives for the city to address the problems that are affecting them on a daily basis. And settling for pennies on the dollar is not accountability. And I say that as someone who is very familiar with state statutes and the law. It was an abomination, it's completely unacceptable, and it should never happen again. And as mayor, I would use the position of the mayor to help make sure that that's so. That's evidenced by the work that I've done on the council, championing and helping the city create a model good repair ordinance that actually gives the city the ability to fix and repair property that is blighted. Those are tools that we have that we should be utilizing more to help reduce blight and also create more affordable housing. We should also be expanding on good ideas like that I worked on with others on the city council to create an ombudsman to help reduce red tape so that those who are in a position to build affordable housing can do so much more easily. And lastly, we have to focus. Just as the United Way has focused on poverty, the city council must be good stewards of our resources.
All right, Mr. Outland, we have to move on to question 4. So our final predetermined question. Boom Supersonic recently announced it will build a super factory at Piedmont Triad International Airport to produce its supersonic Overture airplane and promises to generate more than 1,700 jobs by the end of the decade. Toyota's recent selection of a Greensboro Randolph megasite to produce lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles also promises to generate around 1,700 jobs. You guys have spoken to this. These are 2 major developments that have captured worldwide attention, and the citizens of Greensboro and beyond have plenty of reasons to celebrate. These accomplishments have been made possible through years of collaboration, investment, and planning. So, how can these developments help someone living in poverty? And as mayor, how will you ensure equitable resources are focused in other areas of our city, such as East Greensboro? So this time we will go in order of Mayor Vaughn, Mr. Outling, and Mr. Robert. So Mayor Vaughn.
Thank you. And thank you for outlining those great announcements. I think it's interesting that there was mention that we had a corporate headquarters that moved 85 jobs to Denver. And here we are, we've got a Denver startup company that is moving 1,750 jobs that they will bring to the city of Greensboro. I was very pleased to have been on the recruitment committee for both of those projects. And one thing that we were very concerned about was what can we do to benefit the people of Greensboro? Even though one is technically in Randolph County, it is the Greensboro Randolph megasite. And education is the key component to that. And each of those facilities will be working with the local technical college, either Randolph Community College or GTCC, and coming up with a very specialized curriculum, working with those employers to train and upskill our workers right here in Guilford County, in Randolph County, and that will be free of charge. It's not that they will have to go to GTCC and take out a loan. That was part of the incentives that we worked on with the state, that the state would help pay for the education and upskilling. Another thing that we have to do is work with our school system and those CTE academies. I think that is one of the strongest things that our school system has to offer when it comes to having children graduate from high school with a certificate. One of those certificates is in aviation. So we already have a pipeline. You know, when I talk to the companies who are out at the airport and about boom, you know, the question came up, was there a concern about scavenging workers from maybe from a Honda jet going to a boom? And they all said that this is great because it is going to raise the level of educational attainment. It is better for all of the people at the airport for an opportunity like this.
Okay,
I mean,
Mayor Vaughn, we are going to have to move on to our next candidate. Justin, take it away. 2 minutes.
Thank you. You know, really, your zip code shouldn't be your destiny. But the reality is that without better public transportation, job training, we'll have a donut-shaped prosperity in our area, an island of poverty within Greensboro city limits, surrounded by regional growth. And as the mayor, it's important to understand the reality of the situation. Now, let me be clear. I am very excited about Toyota and Boone. I, as an attorney, helped assist Toyota in coming to Randolph County in the Greensboro Randolph megasite. But the megasite in Boone are outside of the city limits and do not directly add to our tax base. So we need to make sure that this is a victory and a success for the entirety of the region, including Greensboro. We have to support nonprofit programs like the United Way's Family Success Center so that more people can access opportunity. We also have to improve our public transportation system and job training to make sure that everyone in Greensboro has an opportunity to share in those opportunities for prosperity, not just those who live outside of the city limits at the airport or in Randolph County. We also have to make sure that we use our unique assets in North Carolina A&T and UNCG to bring innovation to our community with an innovation corridor. And we also have to make sure that we focus on doing what's right for all of us and not making decisions based on politics or cronyism, like we've seen the city do in supporting giving money to developers downtown without there even being a representation that it would result in a single job, not even being a representation that would be done for those who are not like them and well-connected. For example, with regard to Bourbon Bowl and the supported $80,000 gift that was given to them. Or
all right,
turning down
we're going to have
assistance for police.
Move on to our next candidate for his answer. Eric, Mr. Robert.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I think more than silly slogans and buttons, it is important to understand that such industries and announcement actually creates tremendous opportunities for inclusion and could, if done correctly, really be a game changer in poverty alleviation and prosperity. It's important to also understand that if we don't act now, such incredible opportunities could actually have the contrary effect and further the inequalities as disconnected individuals and neighborhoods are probably could be left behind. The best thing to do, I think, and again, I'm no politician and no expert, but I think it should be proactive right now and recruit and prepare the workforce for the upcoming industries. To do that, we must begin connecting job training and placement for the dedicated neighborhood and individual. And all of that can be done on its own. It can be fragmented. You know, we must create synergies between housing, workforce development, infrastructure, and other activities, so whole has a better chance to succeed. We must strategically link the communities to where the jobs are. We must improve transportation and connect those neighborhoods to the regional economic opportunities. You know, the one thing also that I think is probably the most important as we're talking about poverty is that we must recognize that the poor citizens that we're talking about are actually a really important assets. And often we think of them as liabilities to the system, and not including them, I think, would be a tremendous waste of valuable assets. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Robert. So that concludes today's predetermined questions. Thank you. And we're going to take a few questions from the chat. We've had several, and along the way, I've tried to combine some of these together. But I'm going to start out with really what is, it's really a simple question that does not have a simple answer, but we'll add a little bit of flavor to it. So what are the reasons or explanations for those alarming numbers that we mentioned early on, right? 57,000 people, 1 out of 4 kids living in poverty. What do you think are the reasons behind those numbers? And we'll add a little flavor to it. What are you going to do to reverse those numbers? This time, we will start with Eric, Justin, and Nancy. So Eric, Mr. Robert, your answer.
You know, the easy one would be poor leadership. And I think also it's important to not blame everything on poor leadership. I think there is a certain compassion fatigue that we all are succumbing to, you know, and I think the COVID has actually exacerbated that. You know, I think the priorities have been, I'm trying to come up with the right word. I think the priorities have been a little wrong. You know, we focus on the wrong thing. We've been focusing on supporting wealthy developers instead of actually investing into various programs and trying to uplift some of the communities that have become almost inconvenient to have around. And it seems to me that, you know, if we were like a few small, if we were even like 1 percentage point, you know, I could see that, you know, based on how we read the poverty data, you know, maybe we're not that much more above the national average. But I mean, 5 points is huge. 5 points, you know, in our community translates to tens of thousands of people. And I think, again, that the council and the current leadership, not just at the municipal level, but at the county level and at the regional level, has had the wrong priorities. And I think that everybody, while focusing on economic development, they fail to focus on actual economic growth. And while the two are not mutually exclusive, one only benefits a wealthy developer as opposed to benefiting the community at large. So I think, again, you know, it's lack of spending and lack of attention to the real problem.
Okay, Mr. Robert, thank you. Justin, Mr. Outling, we will move on to you next.
A major contributor to where we are now is a lack of really strong wages. I mean, Greensboro's per capita income was once close to that of Raleigh and Charlotte. Now we're way, way behind. And so when you talk about what resources are there for persons in our community to sustain their household, they have less to work with than our peers across the state of North Carolina. You also look at the crime situation in our community. US News ranking Greensboro the 8th most dangerous city in the country. Greensboro being identified as the murder capital of North Carolina. But we have everything we need to address these problems with effective leadership. With regard to jobs, we need to focus on not just being a member of a board. I can tell you as a council person, you can go to voteoutling.com. We're all members of lots of different boards. But it's actually focusing on the hard things in terms of coming up with solutions, like creating an innovation corridor and using the unique asset of North Carolina A&T. Doing things similar to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where they have 30% of that community's jobs in their innovation corridor and 10% of the population. Doing things like prevention and intervention with regard to public safety, making sure that we're addressing root causes of violent crime. Again, making sure young persons have jobs guarantees, not just pointing them in the direction of where there may be jobs elsewhere, but getting them jobs, but also supporting our police department with the equipment and resources they need. Not doing things like turning down hundreds of thousands of dollars from the federal government through grants for political reasons. Those are some of the causes, but we have everything we need to be successful and move our community forward. And we'll do it with more effective mayoral leadership.
Okay, thank you so much. Mayor Vaughn, you are up next.
Thank you. And I do think it's very necessary to correct one comment, and I'll be happy to send you the links. Greensboro isn't even top 5 when it comes to homicides in North Carolina. And we are ranked number 45 out of 68 when it comes to large cities. Now, those are not good numbers. We know that we have to improve, but working with the communities like we did last year, every Wednesday I was on a community walk with Mothers Standing Against Gun Violence. We reached out to the communities. We've instituted the Cure Violence program and others. We are making headway. Last year, there was a 14% decrease in homicides. We need a 100% decrease in homicides. It's important that people who live in our city have hope. And that is really the biggest issue we are dealing with. And that means that they need access to safe, affordable housing, which is why I am such a staunch opponent to the affordable housing bond, to the down payment assistance. We need kids coming out of high school to know that they can break the cycle of poverty by looking at jobs they've never even considered before, which is why the 500 job initiative was so groundbreaking last year. We were able to place our youth in jobs that gave them mentors and allowed them to look at careers that they may have never thought of before. The city, we need to do this in conjunction with our school system. We need community partners like the United Way. We have made many strides in poverty, access, food access. If you look at the USDA site, we have come down the list a long way when it comes to food insecurity. And that's because we were willing to take bold action and invest $750,000 in a grocery store on Florida. The action we took last night for Lidl.
Okay, we're going to have to
the fact that
move on to
thank you, Michael.
Sorry, we got to keep it into 2 minutes and keep it fair to all. Moving on to the second question in the chat. I will say it's a great question, and again, we're adding a little bit of flavor to it. But how will you connect the expertise and resources at our area institutions of higher education, and then we're going to add in even our other great community assets to help children and families living in poverty? So how will you connect the expert resources we have within our higher education resources and even some other community assets? Mayor Vaughn, we'll start with you this time, and we'll move on to candidate Outling, and then finalize with Mr. Robear. Mayor Vaughn.
Thank you, and I appreciate that question because that is something that I have done throughout my time as mayor and being on city council. I think it is very important that we bring stakeholders to the table, that we bring community members to the table, that we meet people where they are. Often in the past, we made certain assumptions about what neighborhoods needed or wanted. And when we spoke to them, it was actually something quite different. I mentioned the housing task force that I was a part of, still am a part of, where we have city employees, we've got county, we've got DSS, and we have all of our service providers talking about how can we better provide housing? How can we provide emergency relief? What can we do about the very real homeless problem that we have? That is something that we need to address, this permanent supportive housing, which we recently passed, I think is something very important. We are looking at different initiatives. I sit on the board of visitors at North Carolina A&T. We are working with them and their foundation to put a great housing opportunity on East Market Street. We bring our colleges and universities to the table because we want to make sure that their graduates know that they have a place in Greensboro to stay and work. We want them to know that they're appreciated. Being part of Campus Greensboro, where we partner even our children who come home for summer break with major employment entities to give them paid internships during the summer and to build those relationships and mentorships, I think are so important. We really have to make sure that people realize that they have a future in the city of Greensboro. And one important thing to note, when we compare
Mayor
ourselves
Vaughn, we will have to move on to Councilman Justin Outling. Justin.
Thank you. You know, membership in organizations, task force, and boards, that's not action. Action and actually doing something is what we need more of in our community. Doing things like actually prioritizing the community and the voices that are in it. That means not taking action based on special interests, including real estate interests, to water down housing and commercial related ordinances to reduce blight, but make the difficult decisions necessary to move our community forward. The way that we connect our community to the wonderful resources like at North Carolina A&T or my alma mater, UNCG, is the city providing leadership to partner with the universities in a meaningful way. That means actually providing infrastructure in those areas and prioritizing it such that more businesses want to be there. The residents in those areas who are oftentimes economically disadvantaged disproportionately benefit from those types of investments. And when we talk about the tale of the two cities, I think it's quite apropos here because we may be living in two different cities in terms of our perspective. I've been in Greensboro many, many years as a graduate of UNCG and otherwise. I think most would agree that we can do more to partner with our universities, which are tremendous assets. But again, it takes vision, not just membership on a task force, followed by actual action. And although I can count off 30 different task force I and other elected officials are members of, I'll just simply direct you to voteoutling.com, where you can get information on my background, but more importantly, sign up for email communications about specific ways in which we can close the gap between our potential and our reality.
Okay, Justin, Mr. Outling, thank you so much. Eric, Mr. Robert.
Michael, you'll be happy because you're probably gonna get some time back. As the candid answer is that I don't know. I don't have the answer to this question right now. And it seems like everybody does because it's predictable and it's the same thing over and over again. And that's probably one of the reasons why our numbers are going up. And that again, with 5 points above the national average. If you look at all those task force, all those nonprofits, all of the participants, it's always the same players and they all have the same backgrounds. And none of them are really creative and none of them are truly imaginative. So it's kind of like the same definition of insanity. You're doing the same thing and expect a different outcome. And obviously, we haven't gotten a good outcome so far. So my true answer and the most honest response is, I don't know. But I think that we need to be a whole lot more creative. There is an answer to that. And I think that there is a way that we can actually, tackle this problem, using a completely different approach. But as of now, I think that we're using the same tools and the same players is certainly not going to give you a different outcome.
All right, thank you, Mr. Robert. So that officially wraps up our Q&A. Thank you, Mayor Vaughn. Thank you, Councilman Outling and Mr. Robert. I know it was very enjoyable. Thank you for bearing with me as I interrupted your discussions. I would not do that in normal circumstances, but we are in a different format today. Very educational from all ends. And as we said, our upcoming advocacy agenda, I'm sure United Way will be in touch with each one of you to continue the conversation, as well as some of the people in the chat. So at this time, I will turn it back over to our president and CEO, Kari Garvin, who will close out today's event.
Michael, thank you. And you had a tough job there. So I know that was tough to have to sort of break in at the 2-minute mark, but thank you for shepherding the process. I believe this was an incredible opportunity to hear from our candidates. And so again, on behalf of our board and staff, many of whom, by the way, are present this afternoon, thank you to our candidates, Mayor Nancy Vaughan, Councilman Justin Outling, and of course, Mr. Eric Robert. Thank you all for sharing your perspectives today. I also just want to take a special moment to thank United Way of Greater Greensboro Board Chair Brian Pierce, as well as Vice Chair Davita Martin for their presence today. And want to also thank Congresswoman Alma Adams, who is also in our virtual audience. She's present with us. So thank you, Congresswoman Adams, for being with us this afternoon as well. Thanks to all of you who attended and submitted excellent questions. And I do want you to be aware of the chat. There were some of our candidates put information in the chat themselves to keep you connected to their work with updates. So be mindful of that before you log off today. We do hope that this forum has given you a clearer understanding of our participants' poverty-related platforms, as well as a clearer vision for the future of Greensboro that you wish to see. So before we officially close today's meeting, I do want to let you know about a few upcoming events. So as mentioned earlier, United Way of Greater Greensboro is celebrating 100 years of turning your compassion into community change. So I want you to make plans to attend our centennial birthday celebration on March 1st. That will be held here at our United Way office. And that morning, we will announce an official city proclamation. We will unveil an office-installed timeline. We will share our centennial calendar events. We will plant a tree. We'll eat some cake. We'll drink some coffee. We're going to have a great time. And of course, masks and social distancing will be required. Again, I say masks and social distancing will be required, except of course when you're eating cake, right? But other than that, we really will honor those COVID protocols. And you don't want to miss this, I promise you. In addition to the March 1st event, on March 16th, we will kick off our new virtual Lunch and Learns that we're calling Theories of Change, the Centennial Series. And we're kicking it off in a big way by hosting Dr. Sharon Contreras, who is our outgoing superintendent of Guilford County Schools, along with Dr. Mary Jo Cagle, CEO of Cone Health, Eric Aft, CEO of Second Harvest Food Bank, and Brent Christensen, President and CEO of the Greensboro Chamber of Commerce. And so we hope that you will plan to join us on March 16th. I will be leading them through a panel discussion that will address our hope of a future without poverty and the roles that we must all play to make that future a reality. So please be on the lookout for a follow-up email that will contain this information and how you can RSVP to participate in. Now, as we move into this new year, we have a lot to celebrate and we can't wait to see. So together we can, and I know that we will, move families out of poverty. Thanks again. And as I typically say, onward and upward. Take good care, everyone. Thank you.
All right.